Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about supranational cooperation in the European Union from Chapter 14 of our textbook. Right now in front of you, each one of you guys should have your iPad listening to this with a set of headphones, as well as a worksheet labeled Supranational Cooperation in the European Union. Do me a favor, look at the front page. It says, what forces work for and against supranational cooperation among the nations? Down it is a preview activity, which I'd like you to do. In the preview activity, it says, imagine that you are moving into a neighborhood shown below. Which backyard would you choose? Circle it, and then explain why. Once one of your neighbors proposes that the fences should be taken down and a common backyard formed, I'd like you guys to list 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages of this plan. Then explain why you would support or disapprove of this neighborhood proposal. Please take a few minutes, pause this video to do that right now. Now that you have gone through and done the preview activity, please open up your packet and look inside. You will notice that first you will have to do the geoterms. Your geoterms will be on the following slides. Flip over from your geoterms and notice that it says read section 2, 3, and 4. Answer the questions in the arrows for this section, then compare what you read to what you experienced in class. Now, we're not going to do anything with class. We're just going to go through and we're going to work from this PowerPoint to answer each one of these arrows. Notice in that first arrow on the left it says, how does a common market unite Europe? And then how does the creation of the EU trading bloc unite Europe? You will notice in the PowerPoint slides that these questions are there. The answer underneath those questions in the slide is where you're going to write them. I will be explaining as we move through. Our essential question for today is we want to know what forces are working for and against supranational cooperation among the nations. All right, so let's turn back to our geoterms in our packet. And I would like you guys to write each one of the definitions. We are not worried about sentences, just the definition. The first word that we're looking for is centrifugal forces. Now, I want you to pay attention to this because as we look at this word, we're going to notice that this has that FU in it. So fugal forces are forces that divide people, just like the FU would suggest. Please write that down right now. Now we also have centripetal forces. And think about if you were to trip, you were to fall into. That is the same idea as what this definition would suggest. These are forces that unite people. All right. Now when we're talking about supranational cooperation, which is our last geoterm, we are talking about countries that give up some control as they work together to achieve shared goals. Now, I want you to know that this supranational cooperation takes place in Europe. All right? And we are talking about the EU. And most of the reason why they did this is for a common market. And that's a group of countries that act as a single market without trade barriers. Now, when we talk about market, we are talking about business. So they're doing it for economic reasons. In other words, money. So take a minute, pause this video, and make sure that you have all the definitions written down in your geoterms. All right, now flip over your packet and make sure you're on the section that looks or has the heading Section 2, Economic Cooperation in the EU. On this page, you should have arrows pointing to a European map, and above it says centripetal forces. And at the bottom of the page, it has arrows pointing away from the European map that are called centrifugal forces. In each one of those arrows, you're going to be writing answers. Notice the questions. How does a common market unite Europe? That corresponds with the arrow on the very top left-hand corner. You should be writing these bullet points in that arrow. Remember, we said centripetal forces are forces that unite. So these are all things that are uniting Europe under these common factors. Prior to the EU, all of Europe was very separated and divided. Each country had their own market, had their own business, and had their own trading. They did not trade with each other very easily. If they wanted to, you'd have to trade currency and money. You would have to go across country lines, which meant you would have to pay import and export fees. All of this made it very difficult to trade in Europe. The EU is an attempt to wipe away those barriers. And so as that happens, we're going to see that people are going to have more choices. Their goods are going to come at prices that are lower because goods can be produced in different countries for cheaper labor at cheaper prices and then shipped across Europe so that everybody saves. The other thing is without paying those import and those export fees, the prices of all the goods are cheaper. Now let's say you wanted to go to Indiana, but in order for you to go to Indiana, you would have to go to a check place, show an ID, have it stamped, pay an import fee. You probably would never go to Indiana. But now, since the creation of the EU, people are able to travel freely to find work. They're able to go to Germany or France or Italy and find which country is suitable for their work. They also adopted a common currency. This is their form of money, like the dollar bill. In the EU, they now use the euro. Prior to using the euro, you would have the franc in France, you would have the Deutschmark in Denmark, you would have a different currency in Germany, in Italy, in Switzerland. And so each place that you would have to go to, each country you would travel to, you would have to change your money into the local money. With the adoption of a common currency, it makes it easier for people to travel without having to change the money. And so this makes it easier for trade and travel. When it's easier to trade and travel, more people are willing to do it. All right. Now, on the right side of the map, the question reads, how does the creation of a EU trading bloc unite Europe? You're going to fill out these two things here. A trade bloc basically means all of the countries are working together in a common market in the world. Now, European countries are relatively small, but economically powerful. The problem is they're not able to compete with the United States or China because the United States and China are just too big. But what the European Union realized is if they unite all of their countries together, they're going to have a market that's bigger than China or the United States. As a result, they're going to have more economic power. Additionally, by having shared economic goals, they're able to be more concise, all right, and have better returns on their investments in Europe. And so these shared economic goals are something that work for them. Here, look at this chart. This chart is showing us the power of the EU trading bloc. Notice, as I said before, one country, Germany, is not that powerful economically speaking. Same thing with the UK, France, Italy, Spain, and then all of the other nations combined. If we look at the economic might of the United States, they're at about 18 and a half. All right? Germany is at 3.5. There's no way that Germany could economically compete with the United States. But when all of these countries work together, they're stronger than China, Japan, and India. And they're relatively close to where the United States is at. This allows the EU to have more economic power in the world and to drive more of what they want to happen in the market. All right, now at the bottom of section 2, we need to answer these two questions. Our first question, how do the differences between the Western and Eastern nations divide the EU? In that bottom left-hand arrow, you should be writing this. Western members are wealthier than Central and Eastern members. As a result, workers in Western countries earn more money. Workers in poorer EU countries then move to richer ones. What we see happening is people leaving Eastern Europe, Ukraine, and Czech and Slovakia and places like this to go to Germany or to France or to Italy to work. This creates animosity between the people that already live in Germany and the new immigrants, with the people of Germany saying these new people coming in are stealing our jobs and working for less money and are driving our wages down. This is where that animosity is created from. On the right-hand side of centrifugal forces, I want you to look at the question that says, what divisions are created by the use of the euro? And here we see that not everyone has adopted the euro. The example of this is England. England has not adopted the euro. The English pound, all right, is stronger than the euro. And England said, no, we're not doing it. We're not willing to accept this new type of currency. We would rather keep our currency that is strong the way that it is. As a result, this has created some animosity. The other thing that we see that we happen is that the European Union won't let every country use the euro. The EU has literally told some countries their money's not worth enough and that they would actually lead to the deflation of the value of the euro, and so they told them no. As a result, only certain countries can use the euro. Look at this political cartoon. This political cartoon shows us a little bit of how the euro has affected Europe. Now, as we look at this cartoon, notice the eraser, all right, that has the euro symbol on it. And as we look at this, the eraser has erased the border between Spain and France, between Spain and Portugal. all right, between Belgium, Luxembourg, France, and Germany. Yet Switzerland still remains, Czech still remains, Austria and Italy are good, but Austria and Hungary are still divided, as is Slovakia and Poland. So literally what this is showing us is the countries that have adopted the euro and the countries that have not adopted the euro. All right? Remember that this eraser represents that monetary currency of the euro. Flip the page in your packet. Look at section 3. Section 3 is political cooperation in the EU. First thing that we'll be looking at is the centripetal forces. Notice the question: how does the development of supranational level of government unite Europe? These are our centripetal forces. And we see that it brings members together to work on common issues. In other words, all of Europe can be one common group working on environmental problems. They can all work on world problems. They can all work on economic problems together. This allows them, by all working together, to have a common unity. Imagine if they didn't all work on environmental problems together. Pollution in Germany would still seep across to France or to Belgium or to Netherlands or to Switzerland. By them all working together, it allows for all countries to enjoy equal success. To the right of the map, you should be answering in this arrow: how does the development of a European citizenship unite Europe? It encourages Europeans to think of themselves as citizens of Europe, that allows them to live and work anywhere in the EU. Listen, I love Italian food. If I lived in Germany, I would want to go to Italy and eat Italian food. But if I had to go through and change my currency, I had to go through and show a passport in 4 different countries just to get to Italy, I probably wouldn't go. The EU allows me to travel freely across Europe. And remember, Europe's not that big. It's about half the size of the United States. So people do want to be able to travel. The other thing that Europe does very well is they have an efficient transportation system through their trains that allow you to travel all across Europe very, very easily and cheaply and quickly. So people do. Now, if you had to change your money, change your passport, and do all that extra work, people might not want to do those things, right? And so the EU allows for that easily mobility throughout there. The other thing that it does is speaking with one voice for all of its members strengthens Europe's role in the world. Economically, we looked at that map that showed how their wealth combined is much stronger. Politically, though, having one voice and a common theme allows the Europeans to be taken more seriously and listened to much, much better. Take another minute, make sure that you have these things written down, and then go to the next slide, and then press play again. All right, so how the EU government divides Europe. So these are our centrifugal forces. Okay, so notice on that that bottom set on the left-hand side, how does the desire of the European countries to keep their independence divide Europe? Countries have to give up some power, all right? And someone has to carry out the decisions that EU makes. And so one of the problems that we see is that not always do people agree with the decisions that are made. And even if you don't agree, you still have to follow the rules. So let's say I'm Germany and I disagree with the EU about pollution problems. If the EU makes that decision, I still have to follow their rules. On the right-hand side, how can the expansion of EU membership cause division? With growing size, more people equals more differences, right? They have to translate all of the EU documents into hundreds of languages so that everybody can understand what's going on. That causes a lot of division. With more and more people being part of this, more and more people are have reason to be mad at each other. Additionally, the idea of European citizenship has been hard for some to adjust to. Some people feel that their nation's identity will disappear. They say, I'm French, not European. I'm German, not European. I'm not the same as the German. I'm not the same as the French. I'm this, I'm that. And so the idea that they're all trying to work together can cause some animosity. Please pause the video, make sure that you have this all written. We talked about this yesterday, and we talked about how the representation in the European Parliament is not equal, and that some countries have more. And if we look at the caption here, it says, the European Parliament is one of the main bodies of the EU government. The people of the EU vote for its members in elections held every 5 years. Countries with more people have more representatives. In other words, Germany, Italy, Spain, France, United Kingdom are able to make all of the decisions, while countries like Luxembourg and Austria and Slovenia and Croatia and Bulgaria and Greece and Malta and Cyprus, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia all have to basically listen to what those guys say and then do it. This causes a lot of centrifugal forces in the EU Parliament. Also, consider what's going on with Brexit, all right? Britain is actually in the process of exiting the EU right now. If you look at the infographic that I've supplied, it can show you what's going to happen and when or how the UK or United Kingdom is going through and separating itself from the EU. Now, when Britain leaves the EU, what is going to happen to the economic power, the political power, and the strength of the EU moving forward? All right. Make sure that you are now on section 4, and you're going to be answering these questions about cultural identity. All right. So these here are our centripetal forces. All right. And so how has the European Union united Europe by promoting a common culture? Well, they've done things like created common cultural symbols like flags. They have an anthem, and they have EU Day. They also go through and they support cultural programs like the European Union Wind Orchestra and the European Capital Culture. Now on the right-hand side of the arrow, you should be writing, the Euro and the EU passports make travel within the EU easy. It encourages people to travel and learn other languages. And our last one, on the bottom, the centrifugal forces. All right, we're going to be answering the two questions: why do languages divide the European Union, and what are some other forces that continue divisions among the European countries? As we look at this, we see Europe remains diverse with many different languages. There's a lot of different countries, and with those different countries are a lot of different languages. And so people have to learn to communicate amongst each other, which is relatively difficult. We also talked about that idea of a national pride. There's competition and rivalry amongst countries. Listen, there's parts of Germany and France that haven't liked each other for centuries. Britain and France haven't liked each other for millenniums, right? And so now that they're forced to work together, this can cause some problems. On the right-hand side of the arrow, we're looking for other divisions. One of the things that we look at is food. All right, many foods made in Eastern Europe are cooked for like 2 days. In the EU buildings, that's not allowed. They have to eat food within 2 hours. Otherwise, it's got to be thrown away. So for many Eastern Europeans, they can't accept this idea. Holidays and traditions are different. In Spain, they love bullfighting while the rest of the world looks at it as barbaric, right? All of this creates problems. The idea that we wanted you guys to get from all of this is that this supranational cooperation among countries is good, but there's forces that unite and there's forces that divide. And with any things like this, there's going to be challenges. And as we look at our world today and our involvement in the United Nations, in the involvement in NAFTA, and our involvement in these other supranational cooperations can cause us good things and bad things. Please make sure that your packet is complete at this point. Thank you.